All right, my friends, Stephen Harris here, SuccessFlow podcast. It is July 2nd. Happy 4th of July week. I hope you have a lot of really fun plans coming up this weekend to celebrate our country's Independence Day. And Phil and I thought it would be a really cool opportunity to replay last year's episode around Benjamin Franklin, the pursuit of moral perfectness, and his 13 virtues on this great Independence Day that we have coming up. So it's an awesome episode. And it kind of goes into the deep impact that Benjamin Franklin had on our country with the inventions, science, technology, and everything he did for society, along with other founding fathers. So we thought you would enjoy this episode. It's a great replay. I just listened to this one back, and I absolutely love it. It's probably the third or fourth time I've listened to it back since we have recorded it. But I hope you enjoy and have a great week ahead. Happy 4th of July. Last week was the 4th of July, and I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't do an episode on Independence Day and kind of the background of the founding fathers and where it all came from. I've done some research and shared some things in my newsletter about independence and all that. And, you had 5 guys that were assigned to write the Declaration of Independence, right? You had Benjamin Franklin, you had John Adams, you had Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman. And I got my Junto hat on. We know our mascot of our mastermind is Benjamin Franklin. So I think it's appropriate to kind of dive into Benjamin Franklin, the man he was, the 13 values that he came up with, and kind of what all that means. You're the history buff of the family, so I'm excited to learn from you too. And I know you're going to be totally into it. And I'm pretty sure by your facial expression, you're holding back those smiles and those giggles and how giddy you are to jump into this episode. So the bamboo banger is Benjamin Franklin, Junto, 13 values, and all the coolness of what started this country from the founding fathers and everything that is involved. So kick us off. Give us some backstory of what you know about Ben Franklin.
Absolutely. I'm so pumped for this episode. Such a big part of Junto, given that he created it. And not to jump too far ahead, but I just discovered going deeper on this stuff that he actually wanted Junto to be a religion, which he still thinks is possible. It never came to fruition, but his idea, because it was this betterment and improvement and equality amongst the individuals, he actually wanted it to be a religion. So we'll get to Junto in a little bit, but I just think Ben Franklin also builds off really well what we talked about in the Renaissance episode, the polymath. He has a lot of similarities to Leonardo da Vinci about getting better. And he's really the founder of self-improvement, what this podcast is. So it's going to be exciting. But going back to the beginning, I think it's really interesting when we talk about taking risk and knowing what you want in a better life and building a life of success for yourself. He really, when he moved from Boston to Philadelphia, he showed up with nothing, no money. And once he got there, he didn't even have a place to sleep. So he wound up following these people that just kind of went along with the crowd that led him to a Quaker's church. And he didn't know what a Quaker was. And in these churches at that time, they would just sit around in a room in silence and wait for the word of God. And so the word of God didn't come that often. So oftentimes people just be sitting in a room in silence. He didn't know what the heck was going on, but he had shelter and he wound up just falling asleep. So that was his first night in Philly, just wound up in a Quaker's lodge that he didn't know what it was and fell asleep and got his first night's rest, and he was off to the races. But like we talk about in this podcast, is finding a skill and finding a mission, finding something to latch onto. And his was printing. So that's how this all started, was him being a printer, and wound up learning the trade super well, did an internship or apprenticeship with the biggest printer in Philadelphia and just kind of ran with it, fell into it. And so I know you know that much about him, but just that instance of I'm going after something, but I don't know what it is. And life comes at you and you fall into this path and then you just give it your all. I think that's when we hear a lot of the stories of the guests on this podcast and the people in our lives, that's what happens.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of Ben Franklin, I think of the kite and the lightning rod and that whole story. You learn that as kids. He invented the bifocal. He was just a master inventor, but I do remember the printing, and that was like his thing. And Junto was a group of individuals that all had their own thing. It was almost like a networking group, but it was like, just how do we grow personally and professionally? How do we become better men? How do we, just build and learn from each other and different perspectives and ideologies? And I think that's still extremely important in today. And obviously that relates with what we're doing with our own groups and whatnot. So just having that foresight and knowing like human beings need that. They need that community. They need that group of people that they can lean in on and continue to learn from. Ben Franklin starting that is, and I'm sure there was many others before his time as well, but that's one of the most, that's what you think about is, Ben Franklin bringing that group together. And he wasn't the one that wrote the Declaration. He was one of the 5 guys. He did the revisions. Yeah. Jefferson's the one that took the lead on the original draft.
Right.
And so he took the lead, and apparently he went into isolation for like 2 weeks, just didn't see anybody, or just isolated himself, wrote this thing.
The ultimate cave day.
The ultimate cave weeks, right? Like 10 days of it. And then, the other guys that came in, and Ben Franklin was a part of that, that group, and they did the revisions. And then it was July 4th, 1776, when it was ratified, an official document, Declaration of Independence, which is pretty cool to kind of dive into the backstory. We all celebrate 4th of July with barbecues and fireworks and hot dogs and burgers and all this stuff. We all have a great time, but it is kind of cool, like when you're on a path of learning, to dive into some of this history stuff and like where it all started. And of course, Ben Franklin was one of the main proponents of what started this great country that we all live in.
Absolutely. And you brought up some awesome nuggets with the lightning rod that I want to make sure we get to, because it's super interesting that I didn't know before doing this kind of deep dive. But before we do that, I want to go back to Franklin at age 20. And at age 20, he decides that he wants to live a life of high character, integrity, and goodness. He wants to live a life of virtue is actually what he coined it. And to do that, he, like we talk about today, what are the 13 virtues that I'm going to live by, and how do I master them? It's a lot to bite off. We all talk about what is the good life, what is, what we want to do. And he's like, what's the best way I can do this? So he comes up with his 13 virtues. And this would be like a YouTube video that are a self-improvement YouTube video, these 13 hacks to get you to the life that you want. Well, he did this and he found his system, how he could do it in 13 weeks. So what he did is made this list of virtues that we're going to go through quickly back and forth. And his process was to master one virtue a week, and for that virtue to feed the next virtue. So you've got a domino effect. You're going to be super focused and build them one at a time, maintaining them as you go. And this was his process, and it's worked. And in his mind, over the 13 weeks, he had his model for living a life of virtue. So we're going to go through them here back and forth in 13. So his first was temperance, to eat not to dullness and drink not to elevation. So no binge eating, no getting drunk. You can, you eat just the amount to sustain yourself, and you don't overindulge in drinking. This is temperance. And this is what, folks preach today. They get a little more detailed and the dogma of what's right food and should you drink alcohol or should you not. His was temperance, just enough, like moderation. So, that's number one. And that built into his next virtue, which is
silence. So I thought it was cool how he, as you mentioned, he kind of built these in order, and each one, once he tackles one in a simulation to the next one and just keeps going through. And so these 13 are pretty cool. So silence, speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. Stop the gossip. Just shut up. Just focus on how you can make an impact on others in a positive way and speak well of yourself. If you can't, it's like the old saying, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And so I thought that was obviously a great one.
Absolutely. And then after silence, knowing that you're only kind of speaking and contributing when there's value, is order. And so Ben Franklin was ahead of Marie Kondo here, realizing that you need to let all things have their place. Each part of your business should have its time. So this is order and calendar blocking. This is having an environment that's neat and tidy. This is the key that we talk about. We did a whole episode on this, and making sure, and with Shannon, as she is an expert in this, making sure everything has its place and there is order in your life. Pretty simple.
Next is resolution. So resolve to perform what you ought, perform without fail what you resolve. Seeking resolutions in all things, not giving up, going for it. If it aligns, resolving the issues at hand that you can control and not worrying about things that you can't control, and embrace the failures that you're going to have along the way, because we all know that you can't succeed without those failures. So resolution is a focus.
And the next one can get a bad rap, but it's frugality. And even though it can get a bad rap these days, there is a problem with overspending and overextending your means. And this is why Franklin made it a virtue, is to make no expense, but to do good to yourself or others. Also, basically don't waste anything. If it's extra, if it's not a part of the mission, a part of what you've designed as a good life, don't overextend and overspend yourself, because this is a virtue that will feed all of the others.
Yeah, that's a good one. And it's a hard one for sure, but it's so true. All right. Industry. So similar to frugality, but lose no time, be always employed in something useful, cut off all unnecessary actions. If that doesn't scream alignment, I don't know what does. Why are we saying yes to everything?
Such a tough one.
Why are we getting in the chaos? Why are we doing it? So he's just saying, lose no time. Why are we wasting ourselves with all the distractions? Always be working towards something, creating something, and cut off all those unnecessary actions, those distractions that try to bring us down, or those people that try to bring us down, and continue the mission.
Which leads into sincerity, which is one of my favorite. Not using any hurtful deceit. This is not manipulation or using the 48 laws of power to get what you want and get what you want. Think innocently and justly. And if you speak accordingly. This is living these entire virtues. I feel like it encapsulates all of them. We might also use the word authenticity, which is popular these days. Being true to these values and virtues, they're all interwoven, and keeping that model of sincerity in everything you do.
Yeah, that's a perfect one that leads into number 8, justice. Wrong no one by doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. At the end of the day, that's just, essentially it's having compassion. It's balancing interests. It's fairness in all things. And it's sharing the justice with others and, developing relationships and whatnot. But also, if you have wronged somebody, there's justice that comes with that. And so focusing on being an asset to society.
I love it. And that leads into the next one, which I kind of hinted at number 1, but I had to think about this a while, because number 1 and number 9 are very similar. But I think what Franklin did was draw a line between the body and the being. So temperance, number 1, he was getting his body right and getting his biology going right by not overeating, not dulling his senses with alcohol or anything. But number 9 is moderation, which I think is a part of everything that he did. And in moderation, it's trying to avoid extremes. We can do this with politics. We can do this with our personal beliefs, but avoiding those to not resent people or create any barriers that you might not have looked at the other side of. So keeping it moderate and looking at both sides of everything.
Dude, it's so crazy as you read these down, how they just flow into the next one. He really did nail it. So moderation, the next one, number 10, is cleanliness. Tolerate no uncleanliness in body, clothes, or habitation. So and
he's back to the physical world now.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, it's focused on your body as the asset. Whatever you put in your body, the toxins and all that, it's going to come out like crap. And so you focus on eating healthy, focus on being strong, the place that you live in. It could be as simple as cleaning your desk, Ben Franklin, keeping things clear and keeping things cleanliness, right? And then it allows you to focus. I'm a messy desk guy, and it's so refreshing when you take that time to clean off your desk and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can knock some stuff out now. It just seems super clear.
Absolutely.
But I love that one, in body, clothes, and habitation. So I think we did an episode way back on, was it hoarding or stuff? We were just talking about people, how much stuff people have.
Minimalism,
right? Minimalistic, right? And so
very minimalist theme here.
Yes, very much so. And it's just, back to bringing alignment to focus on being the best version of yourself.
Which leads to tranquility. And this goes back to, I think, Naval Ravikant's, and I've said it in Junto, a calm body, a fit mind, and a house full of love. These things cannot be bought. They must be earned. And tranquility, peace of mind is the number one asset we're all looking for. And in his words, it was to be not disturbed by trifles or at accidents common or unavoidable. Essentially, shit happens. And when that happens, you have control. This is the Stoics coming through, as he was a fan of the Stoics. And just letting them, as you say, in the Oppo language, water off a duck's back, calm on the surface, even if things are stirring within. I love it.
So number 12, chastity.
I'm glad you got number 12.
I always think of what was that? Robin Hood Men in Tights and the chastity belt that Marianne, was it Marianne, right? That she had to wear.
Everlast branding there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so funny. Okay, so he said, in his words, rarely use venery, which means like indulgence in the pursuit, or it's the pursuit or indulgence of sexual pleasure. Never use venery but for health or offspring, never to dullness, weakness, or the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. So basically, it's like, hey, I'm here to create a family, or I'm here to share love with the person that I'm with. It's never, practicing chastity is not doing it for your own solo purpose and to the detriment of others, and possibly even the detriment of yourself if you're addicted to it or whatever.
Absolutely. I think there's a whole nother episode here. This is one of those kind of out there topics that I just think are really important when you're talking about pornography or how the Eastern philosophies look at it. And it makes so much sense to me is your sexual energy is literally your utmost power. It's the power to create other life. If you are wasting that energy, you don't have it to create anything else in your life. And that was a big thing for me 3 or 4 years ago that did some research on, and Ben Franklin was way ahead of his time. All of these things are very present in society. So as we try to combat all the pleasures and indulgences that are out there in the world with us, sex is used to market at us. It's such a driver for our primal instincts that you have to take control over, which Ben Franklin was early on. And which he closes it out with humility. And I think this sums up the fact that in the greater scheme of things, we're all just living organisms on a big spinning rock in infinite space, and that you have to stay humble and know that you're just a part of the puzzle. Yes, you should seek to achieve and be on a mission, everything that we talk about in this podcast. But at the end of the day, it's treating others like yourself and having that humility that you're just one piece of the puzzle. And he specifically said, imitate Jesus and Socrates, who, if you look historically, were the most humble people on the planet, even though they were unbelievably impactful, dressed simply, lived simply, and went about their daily business. So those are the 13 values that Ben Franklin did at age 20. I see some of these kids that are younger these days.
Yeah. What were you doing at age 20?
Chasing money and booze and gratification from society, which I would be lying if I said some of those things are not still there. But just to have this awareness and chase of the good life and a productive life and a life of virtue is just so impressive at his age, and no wonder why he had such an impact. Now, with these, another thing that he really delivered Ben Franklin went viral at a time when virality, they called it more trends, but he was viral in a state where communication was passed slowly by the written word and spoken word. So one of the first ways he did this was him creating a fictional character in an almanac. Now, an almanac, for those that don't know, was something that was written down for farmers that let them know the right temperatures and lighting and wind and seasons. Each day it had something for the farmers to abide by so that they could yield the best crops. Well, Ben Franklin put an educational personal development spin on this and created Poor Charlie's Almanac. Are you familiar with Poor Charlie's Almanac?
No, man. I failed history when I was in school, so tell me about it. Hopefully I'm not the only one.
Something for each day. I think it's 365 quotes that you can flip through. and read to live a better life. And some of the sayings from Poor Charlie's Almanac that we live by is, I think one of them is, a visitor and both visitors and fish, after 3 days, they start to stink, which is more of just like a funny quip, but it cracks me up. It's like, if you got family around for more than 3 days, it can kind of wear out.
Go hang out up in Woods Canyon for 3 days, no showers, no nothing, and you start to stench a little bit.
But I think it's more of like, we get worn out by the people, even the closest people to us, if they're around for too long. So I thought that was a really interesting, witty saying there. And then some of the others were, I think, keep your enemies closer. They teach you the flaws in yourself, and all these sayings that we know. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. He had all these quips that just spread like crazy. He printed them himself. They made their way over to Europe and France, and was super. It just went sold like crazy, and made him. It wasn't the first thing that made him a celebrity, but one of the many. Yeah.
So going back to like the Declaration, and obviously the time of year that we're at, there was a line in there that I really liked, that was in the Declaration of Independence. And it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And I think that, in a nutshell, is what Ben Franklin and the Founding Fathers, and I think there was 56 other, or 51 other men that signed it. The pursuit of happiness, I think, is at the crux of it all. Like, find your happiness, find your independence. And that's what our founding fathers wanted for us. And I think when you look for what your happiness is, it is a constant quest. You're going to find it, and then it's temporary. Things are going to change if you don't continue to maintain it. And so I think that's like going back to all the way back then. They wanted their independence from the Kingdom of Great Britain, to be able to have the freedom to pursue their own happiness, life, and liberty. And that's what we're all striving to do. And when you find that alignment and take these 13 virtues that we just went through and build off of those in your own way, and continue to be around the people that support you, and you build that happiness for yourself, that's when you find your independence. And I think if we're not happy, we're dependent on moving through life without any direction. And so
you nailed it with repeating the word pursuit. And I think that is the piece that we get mixed up, and really have to get back to our fundamentals these days, because it's easy to look at that quote and forget that word and say, each man has the right to happiness. That's not it.
Yeah.
You have the right to pursue happiness. It really is back on your hands, and that is the responsibility of the individual. Not that it's given to you by the government, by someone else. That you drove home the pursuit and the journey and the work that's involved to actually get to that point.
Yeah, everyone has their own perception of it, with the people you're around, the actions you take, and the things that you want to do, and whatever your perception of success and happiness looks like. And so just the fact that it originally started with, we want to have the ability to give our people the right to the pursuit of happiness, however they see fit. Obviously, these 13 virtues that we go back to, with morals and all sorts of things, it's going to have positive outcomes. But it's just pretty cool stuff, right? And it's just really neat to go back to the history of how these men thought, how Ben Franklin thought, and the things that we often in today's age, you see people get away from. And if you just get back to the basics, it does flow in a more meaningful and positive way. When you just focus on the things that you're putting in your body, the activities that you're making, the people that are around inspiring and motivating you, and you're on your own pursuit of happiness, and you're not distracted by all the things that are trying to deter you from that path.
100%. And as we kind of kick this off, and a lot of the things we cover, most people think of Benjamin Franklin for his public service, for the drafting of the Constitution, founding the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school, and being the postmaster general, all of these things with the post system, and a person of public service. But later in his life, after, a lot of these achievements, he had a real intentional pivot to science. and saw the importance that science is what's driving progress. And so you hinted on the lightning rod earlier that we all talk about, but what I didn't realize is that at that time, the problem that lightning was. So lightning would oftentimes burn down entire towns because the tallest building in the town was always the church that had a big metal bell at the top of it. So if there was a storm coming at that point in time, everyone would just lock themselves in their homes and pray for the best. Whole towns would get wiped out because of one lightning strike. So this was like the biggest drive of fear, biggest drive of fear in the world, similar to what war and pandemics are now. So when Benjamin Franklin created the lightning rod, he was an instant hero, celebrity beyond our wildest dreams, because he was literally saving the world in a certain way by finding a way to channel electricity to one point that wasn't going to spread and pass on, creating fire. And I had no idea. We think of the key and kite experiment, like you said, but that's what drove him to create the rod that now saves us today. Lightning is directed in mostly specific areas, and it's really it happens in the forest and is more of accidents now, but in society and settled areas, he saved a ton of people and allowed progress to continue. And then along with, the other thing with science, he was that we know about the bifocals, the specific stove that allowed cooking and heating. And he actually was invited to the Scientific Society of Royal London with a number of other inventions. I think the catheter was also one of those, but that ties back to how similar he was to Da Vinci. And one of the things I wanted to drive home on this podcast is the biggest commonality in these polymaths is following your curiosity, which I think is one of it's my biggest strength, I think, is just following what I'm interested in and trying to connect the dots and all those things on how to live a better life. And I think that we can all take, instead of just taking the inputs that are given to us from society or the people around us, really thinking through certain things and taking the space and time to do it is where you can really find a lot of fulfillment, scratch that itch, and really produce great work.
Yeah. I mean, you sharing those stories, I didn't know really any of that. Which is great to hear. Like, did you read his autobiography? Did you read his book?
Yeah.
Is that where you got a lot of this? So, I mean, just the lightning rod story, like he sees an opportunity in front of him. He sees where lightning is going. It's going towards the cross, the metal rod, basically where the highest point and where it's attracting. He's like, how can I make this better? And it goes back to the resolution virtue. And let's test some things out. Let's try some things. I'm curious about this, as you mentioned. And let's go create something that I think could help a lot of people. And then he just put in the action, and now he's an instant saving grace. And that's just one of many, as you alluded to. And it's not even just science or health or wellness or being an author or whatever. It was almost everything. It didn't matter. Printing. It didn't matter what he put his hands on. He just saw opportunities in front of him all over the place and was like, how can I make this better for everyone else? And how can I make the biggest impact I possibly can? I did not read his autobiography. I don't know much about his life to that extent, but just hearing you share those stories just was really eye-opening to hear a guy like that who had no technology, no efficiency, no way to communicate outside of the written word and spoken word, as you said earlier, and was just a go-getter. He just figured shit out and just made it happen.
Doing this refresher has me so back dialed into some of the areas that I might have missed. I'm going to make this a big focus between now and Summit on these virtues and just some of the things we've taken from the story. I don't know if we talked about on a couple episodes, but the last thing I wanted to include here, which I thought was super interesting, with a few of us Junto members taking the alcohol break over the course of the year. I doubt any of them realized this, but Ben Franklin, when he first started in the printing business, printing was a super physically demanding job, which most people don't think about. Lifting the presses, lifting the amounts of parchment that they had to do. So the printers back in that day would often drink beer at lunch and then have more in the afternoon. And so Ben Franklin realized, as much as he loved beer, that he just drank water throughout the day. And that made him so much more energetic, sharp mentally, along with being a more robust human. It talked about how him enjoying swimming and running as a younger man made him stronger to carry out those activities, along with the no drinking beer, that he just surpassed all the other printers and was able to achieve more. It was just a simple thing. So it's back to that physicality, and thought that was such an interesting tie that I never knew about him, because everyone assumes Franklin, he's known for loving beer. I think his quote is, beer is proof that God loves us. So
Yeah,
it's back to that temperance thing that he clearly saw the lines and drew it, and it set him apart and gave him the energy that he needed to discover all these other things. Had to sneak that one in there.
That was a great way to close, man. I mean, it's such a cool episode to go back and get the history. Hopefully you guys listening picked up some things. I know I picked up a lot. Phil's the man when it comes to some of this stuff. And as you can tell, Benjamin Franklin is definitely someone that we look up to, even though it was a few hundred years ago, and we still learn from to this day, and so many other people do as well. So like, subscribe, follow the SuccessFlow podcast. We'll be back at you next week. Hope everyone had a safe and happy 4th of July, and we'll talk to you soon.